It is said that lightning never strikes twice, meaning that an event is rare or unlikely to happen again. But for Mike Rose, the chairman, president, and CEO of Tourmaline Oil, the opposite is true. In fact, Mike's track record of building and running successful companies is nothing short of inspiring. Hey there, welcome back to another episode of C-Suite Unplugged, an Alberta Better podcast series. In this series, host Adam Legg talks to Alberta's top CEOs, entrepreneurs, and business leaders about their journey to the C-Suite, what keeps them up at night as an Albertan and as a leader in their industry, and what their outlook is for the future. On today's episode, you'll hear more about the many successful businesses that Mike has built, his perspective on natural gas in Alberta and in Canada, mantras that he chooses to live by, lessons he's learned from his wife and fellow BCA member and energy executive, Sue Riddell Rose of Perpetual Energy, and you'll hear his long-term view for the province. If you found this episode interesting or insightful, let us know by heading to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and give us a quick review and a rating. Now, on to the show.
Welcome back to another Alberta Better podcast. This is our C-Suite Unplugged series. We know running a successful business is challenging. Building one from scratch and running it well is even harder. And today's guest has done that not once, not twice, but 3 times. Yes, lightning has struck thrice for the now chair, president, and CEO of Tourmaline Oil Corporation, Mike Rose. With an incredible career in the oil and gas sector, Mike leads Canada's largest and North America's 5th largest natural gas production company. He's a brilliant executive, seeing opportunities and plays ahead of the rest, and has made moves that have solidified his company's leadership position. He's a down-to-earth, thoughtful leader and was often my fellow gym buddy at the Bow Valley Club for many, many years. So Mike, thank you for joining with us today.
Thanks, Adam.
Mike, for those who don't know you as well yet, I wonder if you could give us your elevator pitch about Tourmaline and the role that you play.
Sure. Well, Tourmaline will be 15 years old next month. Started in 2008, but I guess we're still just a teenager. So we've gone from zero to Canadian senior producer, producing at 525,000 BOEs a day. As you mentioned, largest natural gas producer and largest natural gas liquids producer. Established, very large positions in what we see as Canada's 2 best and most internationally competitive gas plays, the Alberta Deep Basin and the BC Alberta Montney. We built and operate all our own processing infrastructure, capability of about 2.7 BCF a day. So we're actually the 4th largest midstreamer in the country as well. And that's been a key for surviving volatile and sadly, mostly low gas prices through the life of Tourmaline. So that infrastructure gives us really low op costs. We're probably the low cost capital executor. So we have amongst or maybe the highest margins of all those North American gas producers you quoted. And our market diversification has certainly been a key, and where we sell the gas physically has been a real differentiator. But we think gas is the place to be in the medium and long term. It's kind of the key enabler of our sort of evolving future energy stack. And from just finish the elevator pitch from an investment perspective, we think we offer that at times rare combination of, sustainable, modest growth every year, continuous value increase. And, that shows up via large reserve additions every year and a pretty compelling shareholder return proposition. So our yield is, prospective yield for the next 12 months is about 10%. So that's the story on Tourmaline.
Mike, it's an amazing story. A little later on, when we get into Tourmaline, I'd love to hear how you the integration, the pieces that you've built into your company that are unlike others that have, as you say, given you a bit of a hedge over some of the cyclicality. I'd love to hear you unpack the notion of your vision behind that, because it's
Sure.
unique. It's a differentiator for you, and it's obviously very successful. But we're going to stick with you first for a little while, and so people love to hear the journey of a CEO. Their CEOs are mythical creatures, and people always look at them in awe and say, I'd love to be that one day. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the journey that you took, Mike, finishing high school, a big, wide open world in front of you, to where you are today. What did that journey look like?
Well, I graduated from Streetsville Secondary School in 1975. Then I went to Queen's University and took theology, graduated from Queen's in 79, and was, especially in retrospect, really lucky to catch the tail end of one of the oil and gas sector's great growth and hiring booms. When I got hired by Shell full-time in 79, I was a summer student in 78. I think they hired over 30 people, just geologists and geophysicists, into exploration in 1 year. So yeah, it was different times. So I am a geologist, 45 years in the business now. I really do feel lucky every day to work in what I personally believe is the greatest industry in the world. Once it's in your blood, you can't stop. I always call it the virus you don't want to get rid of. I had 14 years at Shell in E&P between 79 and 93. Enjoyed every assignment I had. The last one was actually managing Canadian E&P research and integrating that with the Shell group. So not as a researcher, more as, an E&P business person, ensuring the technology that was getting developed was, going to get consumed and make us better. But it was a great introduction into the power of technology. Had an opportunity in 93 to go the independent route. So I started Berkeley Petroleum in May of 93. I was the only employee. Had a fellow that I'd met socially who put the money into it. And we grew that up to 40,000 BOEs a day and sold Berkeley to Anadarko, US company, in 2001 for approximately 1.6 billion. So kept going, started Duvernay Oil Corp right after that in the summer of 01. And we grew it to an intermediate producer. We had very large positions, not as big as we have now, but in the Deep Basin and the BC Montney, as it turns out. We were actually pursuing other horizons because at that time, or the beginning of Duvernay, the technology to unlock the Montney wasn't there yet. And we helped pioneer the Montney play along with Arkin and Canna in that sort of 2006 to 2008 timeframe. And then Shell, ironically, came along in mid-08 and wanted Duvernay, so they bought it for 5.6 billion. Started Tourmaline immediately after that in summer 08, which was really during the big financial crisis, which was, for a well-capitalized group of people, a good time to actually be out live. And we've grown that to a Canadian senior.
Yeah, that's amazing. Your track record, Mike, of building those three companies. Tell me, when you finished high school, did you know geology was where you wanted to go, or did it take some thinking? And then when you're in geology, did you know oil and gas was where you wanted to go, or how did that flow?
Well, I'd say, during third year, I wasn't sure, but I was fortunate to get a summer job, and Shell was, going all over Canada to the geology departments at the various universities. Was fortunate to get a job, and even just that, summer student experience, I was like, wow, I really like this stuff. I did have NCERT grant when I graduated, so I could have gone back and, done grad school and research. But I'd say by the time I'd been working for 6 months, and I wasn't drilling any wells yet at that point, it was like, no, I think I'm just going to keep working. I really like this.
Yeah. So it sounds like it's almost a story of oil and gas found you.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing. And
interesting story. The fellow that hired me, I worked for him for the first 4 years at Shell. And then for the last 3, he was running the overall, what we called the lab. And I mentioned I was doing the E&P research. And then I ended up quitting on him, and he was encouraging me when I told him about the opportunity I had, and then, got to do kind of the full circle payback style of thing because he was on the board of Duvernay, our second company. So great. After he retired, so that was kind of fun.
That's awesome. Yeah, it comes full circle. Mike, you just sort of seem to have a sixth sense for the opportunities, for the right plays. Do you look at things differently than some of your peers? If you do you think of things through different lenses or different time horizons, or just a different set of analyses? I'm just curious. I mean, you've just sort of built success on top of success. Anything you think is unique to your approach versus others you see?
Well, I mean, there are a ton of smart E&P people out there. Even just that 14 years at Shell, you realize just how many smart people there are. I mean, it's working hard, looking at a number of opportunities, keeping an open mind. And probably one of the biggest keys for our group is that don't admire it, go try it. And, obviously you have to do all the proper risk analysis and make sure you can afford things. But, one of the keys is just going out and getting things done. One of the mantras I have, you won't find anything if you don't drill wells. So
yeah, that's true.
You got to put the bit in the ground.
Yeah, you got to drill some wells to find some gas, right? Yeah. Mike, could you share with us your leadership philosophy? Built these amazing companies. Are there any experiences or people that helped shape your philosophy?
Sure. As far as, I'll give you the overall philosophy, but, mentors, if you like, Charlie Bruce, the fellow that hired me in the first place, Clay Riddell, my father-in-law, my own father, and then, several managers and VPs through the piece at Shell who I kind of saw like very concise decision making from a couple, which might surprise you for a large company. But in those days, the meetings were quick and it was yes or no. And if your proposal or play wasn't approved, you were told why. So I always appreciated that. So, the philosophy that I have, lead by example, obviously work hard. This is supposed to be fun. This is your only crack at it. So don't forget that part. Personally, I have to be up to speed on every aspect of the business. And I think the staff appreciate that. Be optimistic. That's absolutely critical if you're a petroleum geologist. Kept the organization flat. So, we only have 340 people in head office, and we're the fourth largest producer period in Canada. And the organization's flat. So when I have my management meeting every couple of weeks, all the VPs, all the managers are in the same room. We fortunately have a big room with lots of chairs, so everyone gets the same message. Meetings are quick and they have a purpose, and you decide things. From one of those managers I learned from at Shell, he had a term, he called it MBWA. So that was management by walking around. And I love doing that. I, twice a day, tour around, not the entire company, but various parts of it, stop in at people's doors and just, find out, what's happening. And the best thing is that every single time I've been on one of those tours, I learned something that I didn't know before I left my office. It's amazing, especially if you're a busy company, just how much is going on. Give staff lots of rope, can't overmanage them, and, they get more and more responsibility as they earn it. We're a busy company, so we're the busiest operator from, number of meters drilled on an annual basis. And that makes things easier too. When people are busy, they're generally happy. Their ideas are getting tested. They're, doing stuff that's rewarding for them. No layoffs. Never had one. It doesn't mean, people who have performance issues, might have to go, but we've never had a layoff where we kind of blame it on macroeconomic conditions, because broad layoffs really are corporate culture killers. And I did see that at Shell and learned from that. As far as the actual leadership piece, it's often defined during crises. So you better identify the crisis and, be there full on when there is a crisis, and remain calm. Even if you're getting torn up inside, you have to appear calm. And I guess the last piece, and it comes from my baseball world, get better every day. That's the philosophy of the Okotoks Dogs. I was involved in building the youth program there, and a couple of our kids have played on the college team. But that's their philosophy, is get better every day. Might just be a little bit, but that's what you should be doing.
Yeah, that continuous improvement, that Japanese word of kaizen, right? They're always looking to do a little bit better. Yeah, that's awesome. Mike, what does a day in your life look like? Do you have any key routines or practices that
I don't know. It's probably it'd probably be pretty boring. But get up around 5. We only have one kid at home in the summers now, so 2 older boys have grown up and gone. But we do have 2 dogs, so they get walked around 5:15 in the morning and get here about 6:30. I work out every day, as you know, at the Bow Valley Club pretty much every day around 10:30, and usually listening to some, weird playlist that I've made, or a Pearl Jam concert. Still use those iPod classics because they store the most music. And it's usually on the treadmill. Almost never go out for lunch, eat in my own office, and then, do some work. And that's kind of a good quiet time. And then spend a lot of time, as I mentioned, touring around the company. We do have meetings, but I try and minimize those. And then, probably, to be fair, every second or third day, I go downstairs and have a beer with Brian Robinson, our CFO, and Scott Kirker, who's kind of our chief legal corporate secretary, friend.
Yeah. Consistent routine also helps build success too. So that's a good recipe for success. Mike, if someone were to come to you, say, I want to be the next Mike Rose, what advice would you have for them based on your experience, your career path, anything you'd say that they should do or not do?
First off, if they're going to work in oil and gas, which we really need more people working in oil and gas. Oil and gas is not a sunset industry, and we're way closer to sunrise than we are to sunset. So I got told it was a sunset industry when I started in 79 or, that inference. And well, we're still going and lots more to come. Get as much out of every assignment that you get, even when you're in a starting position. And even if there are, some things that you find challenging, there's always something in your job you can learn from. So make the most of every assignment that you have along the way. The line, Roger Waters' line, is all you touch and all you see is all your life will ever be. And that's extremely important for geologists because it is really an empirical profession. The more plays, the more wireline logs, the more wells, the more tests, the more outcrops that you've seen, the more you know. So that's an important part of it. Try not to be too focused on your own career and your career goals and timetable. I mean, it's important to have them, but, be patient. That can be hard. And, whatever company you're at, your job one should be making that company as profitable and successful as you can. And, wherever your level of responsibility allows. And obviously I'm a big sports guy, but being a team player is huge.
Yeah. As we close the section on you, Mike, is there anything people will be surprised to know about you? You've talked about your passion for baseball, but any other incredible tricks you can do at a party or anything like that?
I get nervous every time I speak publicly, even doing stuff like this. So that probably surprises people.
that does, and don't have a hint of it at all. So you hide that well for sure. Mike, let's switch gears to broadly natural gas and Tourmaline. You're the largest natural gas producer in Canada. You've been a very vocal supporter and champion for the future of natural gas. You've alluded to it over the course of these early questions, but what's your vision for the role of natural gas now and into the future? And what opportunities and challenges, frankly, do you see for Alberta and Canada?
Sure. Well, first off, natural gas, it's very quickly going to be the largest single source of energy in the overall stack. And I think it's going to remain that way for a number of decades. So I like to call it the golden age of gas. Now, I was calling it the golden age of gas in 16 and 17 when it didn't appear that golden, but I'm getting closer to right now. But it will be over 40% of the stack, and net demand is growing every year. And, not only is it a major source of heating and cooling and, electrical generation, I think of it as the great enabler because natural gas actually enables renewables. It will enable hydrogen. Well, it does already. It enables emission reduction. It enables kind of a cleaner global atmosphere. So it kind of sort of permeates through the entire energy stack. For the record, we never transition off anything. Coal was supposed to replace wood 250 years ago, and wood or biomass is still 5 to 7% of the stack. So keep that in mind. We've been trying to, move people to the term energy transformation rather than energy transition because the whole stack is transforming and the whole stack is getting cleaner and lower emission, and that includes coal. So everybody's working through the whole stack, and that's a positive thing. I think gas screens extremely well. Fossil fuels are 82% of the current, energy mix. So I really don't think it's technically or economically feasible to be, off them by 2050 and really not a good idea. It's somewhat irresponsible to kind of advocate for that. When we look at energy, or when I look at it, it's an and, not or. We need more of everything, no doubt about that. And all energy choices should be made on a full cycle cost and emission basis. It's really only the fossil fuel group, and nat gas being in that group, that gets subjected to the full cycle analysis. And we're totally fine with that. We just think, we should always be comparing apples to apples. And, society should be migrating towards higher energy density, lower emission choices over time. And lots of, stuff in the literature on that. And it's fascinating reading, actually. What are some of the challenges? Well, for gas and really, Alberta, we need government support and regulatory alignment to help us get more natural gas pipelines to Tidewater. We don't think there should be an emission cap on the Canadian natural gas industry. We'd prefer it if our federal government championed our natural gas industry, because we think Canadian LNG really does present the best opportunity the country has to reduce global emissions. So, that's probably a good start. We do have, as a country, on average, not every producer, but I think if you averaged up all the producers, the lowest emission nat gas in the world. And, in our mind, we should be supplying as much Canadian gas to the rest of the world to replace coal and diesel. And you do that via LNG. Each BCF a day of LNG, if it went entirely to displacing coal and electrical gen, would eliminate, it's approximately 15.4 megatons per year. Put that in perspective, that's pretty much equivalent to the annual emissions of the entire upstream Canadian gas producers, 1 BCF a day. So you imagine what 10 BCF a day would do. Yeah. Really it would drop the sector's emissions by, really in half. Mm-hmm. And that includes the oil sands. But it kind of gives Canada the opportunity to work on the other 98.5% of the emissions that aren't ours. You can get at that with nat gas. We as a company started actually moving gas to Europe and Asia. We put together a contract on the Gulf Coast with Cheniere and found a pipeline pathway and put the components of that together. So we started shipping in January of this year. So we are the first Canadian company with full exposure to international LNG pricing. The first 4 boats went to Europe, and the next 2, it's 1 boat a month. So the 140 million a day equates to 1 tanker per month. So we've shipped 6. So, be a little cheeky. We can verify that there's a very strong business case for the Canadian LNG business, both in Europe and in Japan. Both countries are asking for it, and we'd sure like to get them a lot more. And we think there's, further LNG growth opportunities going east and west. That our industry's pathway west commences in 25 with LNG Canada, but room to expand that through the phase 2 and then other pipeline options like the Rockies Consortium, which we have a position in and would like to help move that along. We certainly see the ability in the subsurface to support, 10 BCF a day on the West Coast and a large volume going south to the US as well. And that's a big opportunity that, isn't as well known, but the US Gulf Coast complex is going to go from 12 to 24 Bs a day in the second half of this decade. And if you study the US supply basins, some of them are going to tip over or reach their 50% tipping point around the same time, second half of this decade. So there's a really big business opportunity, and that includes Alberta going straight south to the Gulf Coast. So we've started that, and, obviously lots of ideas and government support would help there as well to move more gas south as well as west. The Montney, we talked about that at the outset. As of year end 21, it produced approximately 22 TCF out of the currently estimated ultimate recoverable of 645 TCF. So put it in baseball perspective, you're still in the top of the first inning. And, the Haynesville, the Marcellus, probably in that 40 to 45% produced out. So, an evolving, developing opportunity for Canada going that way. The other advantages our basin has, the infrastructure is in place. There's an active and robust service sector to, execute the drilling plans. And so we've kind of got all the ingredients to be a major LNG player.
It's an opportunity staring us in the face to lean into this opportunity. I don't see the enthusiasm, the frame for this to happen from the federal government.
Yeah, I agree with you, but
disappointing.
It's a great emission reduction opportunity. Yeah. It's just a great economic growth opportunity for Canada. And you read the latest Fraser reports, and we need some growth opportunities.
We do.
And of course, being heavily involved on the First Nations component of it as well, it's a great opportunity for improving First Nations prosperity. So, I've said it before, it's kind of our hat trick, but let's, get in the game and do it.
We agree, Mike. We agree. We've been advocating for that for quite some time, and I can only hope that Canada doesn't miss the opportunity that's right in front of us.
Well, we're going to do everything we can to, make sure the public thinks it's a good idea too.
Yeah, exactly. Mike, in terms of bringing investment to Canada for the resource sector, what are some of the things you think we could do differently to really attract that investment here to Canada?
Well, and it's said from, all areas of our sector, it's really, we need that clear, concise, timely regulatory process that will allow new pipelines and facilities to get built. The gas industry, LNG industry, which should be a component of that, we don't need government money. We just need that certainty. And government money is really taxpayer money. So it's Adam and Mike's money. But, private sector will pay for it. And with, that clear, concise regulatory framework, there's no better message for international investors and capital. That's what they want to see. I was at the LNG conference in Vancouver, was on a panel there last Wednesday, but it went on for 3 or 4 days. Our premier spoke on Thursday. And first of all, it was an absolutely massive conference. I'd never actually been in the Vancouver Conference Center. I've looked at the other side of it from the Pacific Rim Hotel a few times. And then, but getting inside, a very impressive building. It was completely filled with all the SOEs, all the super majors, all the liquefiers, all the pipeline companies, all the support of First Nations. Like, it was awesome. And it was super positive in all regards for gas, Canada, LNG. It was just great to see it all. So, very uplifting and invigorating, and largely boycotted by our federal government at this point in time. We'll give them the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, what a great global stage for Canada to put itself out there, but a real head scratcher that we didn't get strong representation from the federal government to say Canada is open for business on this resource. And so come one, come all, bring your investment and we'll make it happen. And I agree on the regulatory side. We just completed our Future Unbuilt report on improvements needed for the regulatory process, and there's low-hanging fruit, and I think there's a way we can achieve this. So we're optimistic that the feds will move to make it quicker.
Yeah, and what we can offer back is natural gas is a very compelling story on an international emission reduction, global atmospheric emission reduction, but we're not standing still. We're going to keep reducing our emissions as we go as well. So, we're not, when we say no emissions cap on the Canadian gas industry, it doesn't mean we're not going to work extremely hard to keep reducing our emissions.
Yeah, no, exactly. In fact, let's jump to that in terms of you're recognized in Canada as being one of as being the lowest emissions natural gas producer. You've also said it's not just about emissions; it's leading in water management, land surface disturbance. Maybe share with us Tourmaline's overall sustainability approach, your focus on reducing emissions.
Sure. You hit on most of it, which is great. Maybe our communication's better than I thought it was, but
it's strong. It's good.
Full environmental performance improvement. So air, land, and water. So obviously we do focus on emissions on the air piece, but it's more than just CO2 as well. So, we have 5-year EPI plans, if you like, that kind of match our 5-year EP growth plans that we've always had out there publicly. Hard targets for what we're going to do, air, land, and water. We're in our second EPI plan. We'll evergreen them, no pun intended, as we meet the original targets in each plan. We've realized a 25% net methane emission reduction. So not intensity, but actual pure methane, despite growing by about 30% over that period. And we got that one 3 years early. So we have a new methane emission reduction target. And so that's kind of the key is, get after it now. Don't wait. It's hard work. Most of the time, it's not giant step changes. It's just a continuous, relentless reduction of emissions and just kind of chip away at it. Diesel displacement's kind of fun. Got all our drilling rigs off diesel and on the nat gas. One's actually electric, but in most of the places we operate, there isn't the grid. But we help sort of design our own technology, which we're more than willing to share. But the numbers as of end of Q1 23, we displaced 105 million liters of diesel with replacement gas. It's actually saved us over $100 million. And that includes the net cost of the replacement nat gas. So we're not double dipping, if you like. Water management, we built 36 storage and recycling facilities across the 3 operated complexes. Ultimate goal is eliminate fresh water in frac operations and continually reuse your water. So we're pretty much there in BC, not entirely. We're about 70% of the way there in the Deep Basin. And we have this, it's sort of like the space station, or we call it that, our methane emission testing centers at one of our Deep Basin plants. So we're running, 45 experiments at that plant, and it's, measurement and mitigation, and it's sort of evolving the next generation of technologies that'll get that next big change in methane emissions. So that's kind of what we're doing. The clean fuels JV was really just the next logical step in our diesel displacement. what drove the timing on that is the technology for 15-liter nat gas engines is here now. And, we are keen to build gas demand and reduce emissions. So we'll build 20 stations with clean energy. They're a US company. They've got 600 stations across the United States, and we'll continue to expand that. If it really evolves, it could be very large, both from a nat gas demand and from a total emission reduction. And we're just focusing on the 18-wheeler trucks.
Yeah.
So, electric makes sense for small trucks in and around cities, and Murray Mullen will tell you that. But on the long haul, these new nat gas engines, really do look exciting and they work. So now it's just a matter of getting enough of them. And really it almost exists or coexists with small scale LNG as well. So, we've seen what they call the LNG powered trucks as well, and they're very similar. So yeah, it's kind of fun stuff.
That's a ton of stuff going on, Mike. And you've articulated some of the business case, obviously savings, but is this a bit of a personal philosophy, business philosophy, or is some of this critical for your investors from an ESG standpoint, or is it a blend of all three?
It's all of those, and it's not just me here. My other executives and lots of our working level engineers are totally dialed in on this stuff, and they really like it. And some of the technology that we've evolved, that because it wasn't simple getting your drilling rigs off nat gas. There's a number of complications and how much power you need, especially when you're tripping. And when you used to see a rig, when you hear that torque up, the blast of carbon black from the diesel. So there was an effort to provide the horsepower so that you could do that. So it was a really neat integration between people in the field and people in the office. And I'd say our field people had as much to designing this technology as some high level engineers that we have here. So it's a really neat corroboration, and young engineers are really excited about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's great to innovate. It's great to innovate and do new things. And you're a leader in that. The industry is seeing innovation. Maybe Mike, what are you seeing some of the emerging things that are on the horizon that you're excited about? You think that could continue to transform and advance the industry?
Well, CCUS, we're involved in that as well. So, looking at all the technologies that will allow you to separate the CO2 in your plant exhaust stream into a pure CO2 stream, and you would then just simply inject it. The Alberta government had some, small scale, I can't remember exactly what they called it, but essentially it's small scale CCUS for the gas producers. For the oil sands and all about pathways, that is a large centralized hub and pipeline, but the gas producers were spread across an enormous area. So that model doesn't work. So this small scale CCUS, where you can secure the rights to the appropriate reservoirs kind of right around your plant site. And when you find the technology or series of technologies that allow you to create that pure CO2 stream, then we'll just inject it locally. And so, we're excited about that. And we're really happy that that's what came out as far as the policies concerned. Electrification will certainly help, but I think, the challenges there. The grid isn't always in the same place, but, we'll certainly to electrify as much as we can through our operations. And, the current clean tech revolution, if you like, Canadian oil and gas is, something like 75% of what is broadly called the clean tech business segment in Canada. And there really is a revolution going on. It's super fun to be in the middle of it, and we will continually get better. And then the only cautionary outlook is you can't put an artificial timeline on technology evolution. You can't ask for it in 2030 or 2050, but there's zero doubt in my mind we're going to get there. Technology's gotten mankind to the fabulous spot we're in now. If you take a Bjorn Lomborg look at it, that things actually are pretty good.
Yeah, we're far better off than we used to be.
And if we let it, they'll get a lot better.
No, absolutely. Innovation keeps our quality of life improving year over year. Mike, a little bit of a switch back on the personal side as we move to close here. Last year, you were very deservedly recognized by the Energy Council with the 2022 Canada Lifetime Achievement Award. And maybe share with us, what did that award mean to you after so many years in the industry?
Well, it was really nice that they recognized it and acknowledged it. But I think, anyone in a similar position to me really it's your whole team. Yes, you can do innovative things. And my wife occasionally tells me I'm very lucky, but you'd rather have lucky geologists than good geologists. Anyway, but it's really the team. And the real award's being able to work in this industry because I just love it and work with the smart people that we've been lucky to accumulate here. What gets me the most excited or feel the best is how many shareholders and employees have done well financially through Berkeley, Duvernay, and Tourmaline. 22 was a watershed year. I mean, we had a long dry patch, as did the whole sector between kind of middle of 2014 through to end of 2021. And so seeing how many people finally reap the reward of about a decade of hard work, that actually makes me feel good. And I know Sue and I both feel the same way, that creating economic prosperity and employment, either in the field or at your various companies or shareholders across the country being rewarded. That's the best part.
Yeah, very, very few higher callings and creating jobs and helping people build prosperity and wealth. Speaking of Sue, we're fortunate to have at BCA both of the Roses as members, you and with Sue, who's president and CEO of Perpetual Energy. You guys are just such an amazing couple as community leaders, business leaders. How do you do it? How do you support each other running two successful companies, busy community involvement?
Yeah, it's certainly a balance. So patience comes into it, and hopefully I have enough of it. Sue's a lot nicer than me, so she gets asked to do even more than I do. But the demand she gets from people outside, she's actually running two companies for the record. The call on her time is enormous, and people are well-meaning. Can you join this board, or we've got this new philanthropic effort, or can you be on this panel? It's amazing how much she gets done, and she's very patient and trustworthy and nice to everyone. So I can definitely learn from that. But it does help we're aligned. Family's number one, especially our three sons. We're completely aligned on doing lots of philanthropy, and philanthropy is not for everyone, and I make no judgment. But if you are aligned that way, it's good that we kind of see what we want. If we can, we'll invest as much as we possibly can, and the focus is on youth, so health, education, and sports. And I guess the last part is we're aligned on the view that the best thing we can do is actually keep working as long as we can, because it's probably how we make the most impact on the particular world that we're in, be it employees or shareholders or people in the community, people that need new philanthropy. So, we're pretty much working for others at this point.
Well, Mike, your track record is almost unparalleled. So yes, I think people do hope you keep working for a long more time. With you and Sue and three boys, as you look at the family overall, what excites you, keeps you hopeful about the years ahead here in Alberta?
Well, how many smart young people there are, whether they're at this company or just out in the community. I think, people are getting smarter and smarter. So that is exciting. I am excited about Alberta's future. Obviously, it's not all clear skies, and not all necessarily clear skies for Canada. We have an enormous amount of potential, but there are some challenges realizing it. And unfortunately, we're creating most of them ourselves. On positive, I think in Alberta, we do have a government that's interested in getting things done. They do support free enterprise, and they are, as best they can, trying to seek a clearer, quicker regulatory framework. I am concerned with our federal energy and environmental policy and kind of overall economic plan for the country. It doesn't feel like we're going down the right path. And, it's going to be expensive. And the impact on the large segments of the population that can least afford it is, that's the biggest worry. And I don't know if everyone sees it coming. And just, the negative impact from kind of how we're running things on our country. It can be devastating. We don't have an infinite economy. Nobody does. But, the United States can, I think, absorb a lot more bad policy for a lot longer than we can. For sure. But, we don't have infinite capacity, and, we can inflict permanent damage. So we need to really, think about that and evolve what really is a coherent, well thought out, scientific, economic, integrated energy and environment policy is what we really need. biggest concern for Alberta is that federal overreach into provincial business and resource jurisdiction, kind of using what really is an extreme climate policy to rationalize it. So, hopefully everyone takes pause and does the right thing. From a half full perspective, or back to being an optimist, which I am, Canada is blessed with an abundance of resource wealth, and it's not just oil and gas. And, I think we're the best or very close to being the best in the world in the whole resource spectrum. So whether it's oil and gas, mining, agriculture, forestry, clean tech, we're at the top. And we've got a huge advantage, but it is a competitive world out there. And our government should be working, all levels of government, to kind of garner every benefit they can for all of our citizens. Because if we don't, those more competitive countries will just eat our lunch. And what does that mean in the gas business? We talked about it. We lose the huge economic opportunity, and we lose the huge emission opportunity for the global atmosphere. So in our resource industry, we're continually evolving, we're continually improving, getting more efficient, getting cleaner, and we're using what's between our ears to do an ever better job at what's beneath our feet. I don't think that's quite how it went, but that's my variation on that line.
Well, I think that's so true. An incredibly optimistic view of the opportunity, the potential for Alberta, for Canada to play, frankly, a global leadership role in helping reduce global emissions, which is what we should have our eye on, not just domestic emissions, and what that does in terms of spurring innovation, what that does in terms of generating wealth and prosperity for people all across Canada, quite frankly.
All across Canada, all the First Nations, we can,
exactly.
Everybody can win.
Yeah, totally agree. Mike, before we close, anything that you want to share with our listeners that we haven't touched on so far?
No, I think that's, you can keep asking questions, but I think that's a good start. So, yeah.
Well, Mike, thank you so much for being part of the podcast, for your leadership, for what you've done to help support the sector, the province, the country, and just, it's a privilege to call you a member.
Well, thank you. You keep doing what you're doing as well. So we'll fix this together.
Let's do it. Look forward to it. Thank you,
Thanks,
Mike.
Guys.
Well, thank you for joining us for this episode of C-Suite Unplugged, an Alberta Better podcast series. This podcast is a production of the Business Council of Alberta, and you can learn more about us at businesscouncilab.com. And we'd love to connect with you on social media, so give us a follow at BizCouncilAB on Twitter, LinkedIn, TikTok, and YouTube. And if you liked this episode and want to support our message of shared prosperity for all, please be sure to head over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts to subscribe, rate the show, and give us a quick review. New episodes drop every other Tuesday. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.